me see if I can go back to this. Okay. So my invitation is for everybody to start with standing up. If that's available to you. Let's see if I can make this so that you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Those who have that available to them. Okay, so with your body standing here, just take a notice of the shape that your body's in. So it's a different shape than sitting. And feel your feet through your shoes, connected with the carpet and the floor. And allow your weight to drop through your length into your legs and into the floor. So we want to invite relaxation. Now, relaxation is a really important part of meditation. To let go of the tension in the big muscles in the back, in the legs, in the abdomen, and in the small muscles behind the eyes, and in the neck, in the jaw. So just allowing your eyes to be gently, softly open. But your attention is inward with the sensations in your body. If that's easeful for you. And if that's not easeful for you, there's no need to make yourself do that. Just allow your eyes to gently look and notice what's easeful and pleasant, and stay with that. Listen to the sounds of my voice, the sounds inside the room, the sounds outside of the room. So you always have choice about where you focus your attention. And there's no need to put your attention someplace where it feels very disturbing or distressing. So right now we're relaxing our body, feeling our weight sink into the floor. And as we feel our weight sink into the floor, just notice how the earth receives us perfectly, completely. So our ability to relax is hugely supported by the earth holding and receiving us. And we can trust that. So in addition to relaxing, we can also feel the nourishment of the in-breath. And connect with where you feel the in-breath strongest. You might notice the movement of the abdomen or the coolness of the nostrils. You may notice the air passing through your throat. There isn't a right or wrong way to notice your breath. But what's helpful is to feel how delicious it is, how soothing it is. How calming it is to breathe in and allow the in-breath to fill you all the way up. From your toes, through your legs and your back, your fingers, your neck, your head, all the way to the top of your head. So any of us who know physiology will know that our anatomical breath doesn't go into our toes, but the energetic breath, the impact of our breath can. So the invitation is to notice the uplift, the enlivening of our in-breath throughout our whole body. And an increased relaxation with each out-breath. And so just breathing in and breathing out, filling the body with the delicious, cool in-breath. And feeling the warm, moist out-breath. Support deepening, relaxing, and letting go. Letting go of our muscle tension, letting go of our thinking mind, letting go of our plans, letting go of the busyness of the day, letting go of the movement and the travel to get here. So that our breathing invites us into the present moment. Feeling nourished and relaxed. Now, with interest and curiosity, the invitation is to change your posture and move from standing to sitting, as if this is the first time you have ever done this. I'm curious, what do you need to move, and what does it feel like in your breath to go from standing to sitting. And as you get settled in your chair, seated, just notice the shape of the body is different. And if it's available for you to sit on the front edge of the chair, and that supports your hips being in the right relationship with your spine. So that there's a natural small arch in the small of the back. And that arch mechanically sets your spine up to be elongated with the least amount of tension. The less tension, the more ease. So notice if in moving from standing to sitting, there's tension in your feet or in your legs. Or if there's a pulling up feeling from your pelvic floor. And just invite these areas to open and relax and soften. And continue the nourishment of breathing in and out. Feeling the uplift of each in-breath. The relaxation and letting go of each out-breath. And periodically let your attention just check and notice what's happened to your posture. Not because you might be doing it wrong, but just because when we pay attention and set up our body in a way that allows the maximum amount of ease, then we have more ease. So for these next 15 minutes of our meditation, allow your breath to come and go naturally, easily, without changing it, just allowing your attention to rest with the in-breath and the out-breath. And if you notice your attention starts to be present with thoughts or memories or planning, just notice that. Turn your attention to that, touch it, and refocus on the breath. There's no need for an opinion about what happened or a judgment about what happened. Just a loving, embracing, and redirecting of attention to the breath. Notice where your attention is resting. And if it's wandered away from the breath, and it's helpful, just lovingly redirect it back to the nourishing in-breath and relaxing out-breath. So I want to talk about the Buddha's teaching and joy.
I have to leave early.
Thank you. Yeah. There's many different kinds of joy that we can experience in the path of meditation. The first kind of joy is just the joy of having our attention settle long enough that we can appreciate the beautiful things that are around us. You know, tonight the sunset was glorious. It was just beautiful. But it's easy when we're feeling agitated or we're feeling anxious, we're feeling worried about something, that our attention doesn't settle with the beauty of the sunset, and we move our attention and start thinking about the things that we feel anxious about. And so rather than just relax and take in the color, take in the glory of the evening, our attention shifts and we focus on something that we're worried about, we're feeling anxious about. So the first kind of joy is the simple joy of being able to be with simple pleasures in the world, in our lives, and enjoy them as fully as possible. I was trying to get some things photocopied for you tonight, because just a couple days ago, the Rewiring for Joy retreat that Deborah Eden Tull and I are co-teaching in the end of April and May of next year, it was just live on the hosting website of the Multiversity, the 1440 Multiversity. So I went to a print store in Piedmont, and the print store in Piedmont was closed. So it took me like driving around the block 6 times to get a parking spot. So I got a parking spot and I walked to the store, and the store was closed. And so it's easy to feel aggravated about that, you know. But instead of feeling aggravated about that, I thought, oh, I get to be out and have a walk, which is what I was hoping to do anyway, you know. So to shift one's focus attention from the unpleasant thing that can be obvious, and to notice the things that we can feel grateful for. So the second kind of happiness or joy that we can experience is when our attention moves into the qualities of gratitude, of kindness, of joy, of equanimity. And this kind of joy, this kind of happiness, is something that we can feel whether or not there is necessarily an obvious reason to be feeling it. So yesterday was this conference that I went to. It was a whole conference on laughter yoga. And one of the keynote speakers was this amazing speaker who had been a foreign correspondent and journalist and had gotten blown up by a bomb. And her whole talk was the way in which her using gratitude has helped her in her life and has helped her navigate these very significant physical illnesses, disabilities, months of surgeries and being in comas and, oh my goodness, just really extreme challenges. And yet the whole focus of her conversation was how she kept focusing her attention on gratitude, on the things that were happening that were good her husband who'd show up every day, the ability to listen to her mother on the telephone, her companion dog. And so every single day to make a point of focusing on the things that we feel grateful for, it changes what we are noticing. So my father, he told me this story a number of times. And I think he told me this story because I think he found it kind of incredible to believe. My father was born in 1927, and so lived through the Depression. And so there was a sense of hardship, and coming out of that was really significant. To be able to not have so much hardship was a really important value that he lived with, and he wanted us to also have. And so he would tell this story. He said there was a rabbi, and the rabbi was speaking to a man. The man went to him, and he said, "You know, Rabbi Levison, I understand why God asks us to be grateful for the blessings of our life, but I don't understand why God asks us to be grateful for the challenges and the hardships of our life." So Rabbi Leverson says, "I know exactly who you should go talk to because he will have the answer. Go across the town and go find Moshe and ask Moshe the same question." So he goes across the town and he finds where Moshe's living, and Moshe's living in a hovel. And in this hovel, there's only like cardboard boxes and damaged furniture. There's no food on the counters, and the temperature is cold, and there's a break in the window, and there's a hole in the roof. And so it looks, and there's no floor, there's just earth for the floor. There's nothing, it doesn't have a carpet, there's no tiling, the epitome of hardship. And so he goes to Moshe, he says, "Moshe, Rabbi Levinson told me to come talk to you." He says, "I understand why God asks us to feel grateful for our blessings. But why does God ask us to feel grateful for our hardships?" And Moshe says, "I don't know. I've never had any." So no matter where we are, we can look at things in terms of the extraordinary challenges that we each have had to live through, and we can also focus on the blessings of what we all have to live with and the gratitude that we have for that. And that's true for anyone. That's true for all of us. That's always true. So we are living in an intense time. We've got fires that are rapidly moving through Sonoma County, and huge numbers of people have been evacuated. This is exactly the same area that I was living in when the fires came 2 years ago, and all of this challenge happened to me, So I know in my bones the kind of like what it can feel like to be evacuated and dislocated and to not have a home, and I know it. And so, I'm looking out for my friends and making sure that they are okay and safe. And I'm also careful where I'm focusing my attention to make sure that I'm not letting myself move back into an agitation, an anxiety, a stress response that's kind of like in my body. It's easy for me to access because I just lived it. And my health is still slowly emerging out of it. I'm not anywhere near well yet, you know. So I have choice about where I focus my attention. And one of the places that I can focus my attention is care and support for others, joy and gratitude for the goodness that we have, a sense of warmth and safety that comes not from clinging, but from presence, from awareness, and from recognizing that, you know, it can just change so quickly. The winds are fierce, and fire moves fast, and none of these things are within our personal control. So there's gratitude, and there's kindness, there's compassion. Welcome. And kindness and compassion are also really important places where we can bring our attention and bring it to the qualities inside of ourselves that are not easy to be with. You know, the Buddha said, if we surveyed the whole world system, we could not find anybody, any living being that was more deserving of love and kindness than ourselves. And yet, when we wake up in the morning, how many of us feel that loving kindness is something that I have easy access to, it's really important for me to develop, and I am at least as deserving as anyone else to be the recipient of it? Is this like our first thought in the morning? So this is a place where we can practice, where we can cultivate, we can begin to massage and get the sense that it's not that we are making ourselves special and separate from anyone else. It's that we too are worthy and deserving of this kindness that can fill us up and allow us to feel a sense of well-being. Just like the sun radiates, and the radiation of the sun is not dependent on whether or not someone is worthy to receive it. You know, kindness is something that we can begin to cultivate for ourselves. And just bring it into our systems and allow it to slowly transform our own ideas about whether you need to be worthy in order to receive it. I want to tell you a little story. When I lived in Australia in the year 2000, one of the things that I noticed about living in Australia was there were many, many, many different kinds of ants. There were like 10,000 different species of ants. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think that's correct. There were sweet ants, and there were fire ants that stung you, and there were little ants, and there were big ants, and there were honey ants. And there were bull ants. And bull ants were like 1.5 inches long, and they had pitchforks in front of their faces that were like hypodermic needles that would inject you with this venom. And anyone who was anybody in the bush of Australia, you got to recognize a bush ant really quickly because they were territorial and they were aggressive. And if they bit you, it was really intensely painful. For a week, it was hurting really, really a lot. And another week, it was itching so much, it was like crazy making. So everyone got to know about the bull ants and be careful about the bull ants, because the consequences of being bit by them was 2 weeks of intensely unpleasant sensation. So where I was living was in this little hut that was probably about 6 feet wide and 7.5 feet long, and I lived in this hut for 2 years. And I loved my little hut. I loved my little hut. And right outside my little hut was a walking path. And it was a Cadillac walking path. Cadillac because it was perfectly soft sand. It was like 4 feet wide, perfectly level. It was like 80 feet long. And all I could see in any direction was unbroken wilderness of living in this national park outside of Sydney, Australia. I loved my little hut and my walking path. So my walking path connected with a trail that went down to the library, went down to the kitchen. And off of that trail, there was a bull ant's nest. So the bull ants would go on forays and capture dead insects and drag it back into their nest for food. And so I was really careful when I would pass anywhere near their bull ant's nest to watch out for them and step out of their way. But what was fascinating to me was that my path was like 15 feet away from their nest, but it was on my path. And they would make forays onto my path. But when it was my path, I could walk on my path backwards with my eyes closed at night with no flashlight. I never worried about the bull ants because somehow the bull ants knew that that was my path. And on my path, they stayed out of my way. And I was incredulous that an ant that's this big can know the difference between their path and my path and be respectful for me when it was my path. So I thought, my goodness, if an ant can live with respect, what would happen if I also lived with respect? Not because somebody I deemed worthy of my respect, but just because living with respect was a nice way of living. Because it made me feel good. To just move forward in this world with respect. So that's a quality of kindness, is to live with respect for the living beings that you connect with. And to not presume that because I am a human, I have nothing to learn from this ant. That completely transformed my belief system, seeing that. So gratitude and kindness are things that we can fill our lives up with, our hearts up with, when we understand how to focus our attention in the right way. And joy is also like that. We can learn to look for things that are joyful. And what's really sweet about joy is that we can share it with each other. So when I feel filled up with joy, my eyes are glistening and I'm smiling, and I share that with somebody that I care about. They don't have to be there. You know, they can feel my own joy and feel it, let it fill them. So one of the things about joy is that we can get joyful by observing somebody else's joy. Mm-hmm. And so when we have been through something that's challenging, then it's helpful to hang out with people that are joyful. I've had some challenges in these last few years that I mentioned at the beginning. And one of the challenges that I didn't mention is that my mom passed away about 5 months ago. And so when I was feeling thick with grief, I would walk through the neighborhood and smell the roses and let the perfume of the roses fill me up. And then I'd go to the dog park with dog treats in my pocket. And at any opportunity, I would ask owners if I could feed them treats. And I'd feed them treats and I'd bend their ears and I'd stroke them and I'd pull their tails and they'd wag. And just that kind of contact is really supportive when you're feeling the impact of grief. So it's not that I wanted to push the grief away or say that it had no reason to be there or not do the work connected to it. But even in the midst of something like losing one's parent, one's mother, there can be ways where we can focus our attention, and so our system can be filled with things that are nourishing and joyful. That's really important. So these teachings on letting our attention come into coherence, shifting our focus to the qualities of gratitude, of respect, of kindness, of joy, of compassion. These are all really important qualities and teachings and instructions that the Buddha gave us on where we can focus our attention in order to change our experiences. But what can happen is that we can be in a situation where, like I was after the fire, where it's not easy to sit still, where we don't have easy access to joy. And so when we're in situations like that, where the stress has compounded, and it's hard for us to relax. It's hard for us to make wise choices in where we focus our attention. Then in situations like that, we need slightly different instructions about how to focus our attention and what practice actually is. And so right now I am involved in an intensive course, and it is working with the foundations of mindfulness, but also including what happens when we are in these situations where the stress response from limbic impairment or trauma is such that it's not easy or it's even skillful for us to use the regular meditation instructions the way the Buddha gave them. We need to make some adaptations. So, what would an adaptation be like? Well, one adaptation is that when we come into a meditation room, the normal instruction is to sit quietly, to sit still, and to close your eyes. And when we're feeling so much anxiety, or when we're experiencing limbic injury, that's sometimes the least thing that we want to do, the last thing that we want to do. It doesn't feel comfortable to close our eyes, and it certainly doesn't feel comfortable to have to sit still. So what we can do is we can give ourselves permission to keep our eyes open, and depending on the teacher and the context, we can stand up, we can be in the back of the room and just do gentle walking back and forth. We can open our eyes and look around at things that are comforting, so that we're not asking ourselves to do something that pushes us against our natural instincts that's not helpful. Let me tell you another story. So during another time when I was navigating multiple chemical sensitivity, so in that situation it was a mold exposure that had triggered this health condition. So I was traveling and I was staying in different houses and with different friends, and I had asked a friend if I could stay in her house and had said, I'm navigating all this chemical sensitivity, and it's hard for me to be in the same house, in the same space with chemicals. So I said, would it be possible to take the chemicals and put them outside? She said, sure. So she was really incredibly thoughtful and kind, and wanted to make a point of cleaning the house several days before I came, so that if there was any residue of anything, it would air out. She took all the chemicals, the cleaning solutions, the solvents, everything that had any fragrance in it, she put it in the garage as a welcoming, so that it would be safe for me to be there. So I was hugely grateful to have that support. And I went, and I was visited, and had a cup of tea, and I went to rest. And I got in the bed, and the sheets had been washed with fabric softener. And my system went into like this red alarm, as if I was in the middle of some kind of open machine gun fire. My nervous system was relating to the input of the fabric softener with alarm as if it was life-threatening. Now, in my head, I knew it was not life-threatening. So I kept on saying, it's fabric softener, just relax. It's just fabric softener, just relax. And my nervous system didn't want to have anything to do with that information. So I took the sheets off of the bed, and I put them in a plastic, and I stuck them in outside in the garage, and I had another something that I figured out to sleep in, and I couldn't sleep because my system was all jacked up. So the next morning when I got up, I had a meeting in town, and I took my bicycle and I rode my bike to the meeting. And I noticed that when I got on my bike and I started using my legs, I started to relax. Finally, I started to relax. I started to calm down. So what happens is that when our system gets activated like that, our cognitive brain has no communication with what's actually going on. It can't regulate our nervous system and tell ourselves to calm down. So even though I had information that it was fabric softener, this time the reptilian and the limbic part of my brain, they were so stressed out that they needed a limbic response rather than a cognitive response. So to get on my bike and pedal away is me escaping the danger. So my limbic system was like, I am running away from the danger, and so I can now relax, okay? And so when we understand that when those kinds of things happen, we need to actually bring forward a different kind of response, then that helps us calm down. And so sometimes what can happen is that, we have some kind of a limbic impairment, and we come into a retreat center, and we come in and we want to run, or we feel angry, and we think, oh my goodness, I'm in a meditation center, I need to sit still and I shouldn't be angry. Well, ordinarily, that's correct. But when we're navigating a limbic injury, what we need is to understand that it's not ordinary. And sometimes our instinct to run away is like my instinct to escape the danger, which was exactly what I needed in order to relax. And so there's a shift in our understanding between when we are in the ordinary bell curve of human experience and can be present with difficult things and watch them arise and notice them and be present for when they end. And when we're on the front end of the bell curve, where what we're navigating actually requires different instructions. When we're navigating those kinds of experiences, it's not at all helpful for us to stay with the unpleasant experience. We can touch it, but we need to redirect our attention away from it into something that's either neutral or pleasant. And so what I am noticing in my life, and after many years of meditation and having gone through some of the things that I've gone through, is that what is helping me is a certain amount of discernment, of understanding when the classical teachings are really helpful to use and apply, and when we need to have instructions that are different, and how these two things can either support each other or be an antagonistic to each other. And the more that I understand the discernment, the more that I feel more resolved or skilled or able to navigate the variety of circumstances that I've lived through, from tremendous joy and deep, deep pleasure from insight and experiences of meditation, to being rattled and not feeling settled and feeling anxious most of the time, which is a natural response when our limbic system is impaired. So it's not a personal reflection. It's not like something's wrong with you or something was wrong with me in terms of, it's just what happens to the nervous system when it gets overloaded. And there's like just so much that things a person can take, and after a certain amount, then there's stress responses that come out. And in my situation, it feels to me like the stress was the result of toxicity. It was just too much toxicity in the air that I breathed in that was what did it, was what tipped me over the edge. So I share all these things just as a way of offering some encouragement and as a way of supporting you wherever you're at, that wherever you're at is an okay place to be, and that there are teachings that can be used that are really a good match. But what my encouragement also is to get out of the idea that there is one teaching that is going to be the one thing that's going to do it all, because there isn't. So I'm sorry if that's disappointing. That's my experience of life and truth, is that we need different teachings for different experiences and different places where we're at. So I'd like to pause here, invite your impact, your feedback, your questions about what I've shared and how to bring this into your own life.
I just wanted to share an experience. When I was meditating and my mind wandered, I recognized and embraced whatever it wandered to, and then came back, and it was so easy. It was with a lot of ease. Often, we are self-sabotaging in how we deal with that wandering. But anyway, that was my experience tonight, so I really appreciated it.
Oh, it makes me very happy to hear. Very happy to hear. Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I'm going to try to explain something that I think relates to what you're speaking about, which is that my husband on August 27th fell off of his bike, and he did have a concussion, And when he came home from the hospital, which was after a day, we had the hardest time relating to one another because it was like, like you said, limbic injury. Since then, we've seen brain scans, like we just saw the brain scans for him this last week. But there were injuries, I think, from falling to the pavement. And he kept saying, I'm making mistakes. I'm going to make a mistake. There were a lot of things that happened, but it was so hard to help. I was trying to help him, but he was in such pain from broken ribs, broken clavicle, but from the brain injury. And it took so long for the brain to kind of come around. For about 3 weeks it didn't come around. And so it was really hard to be helpful. And I can only say that I know what you mean when you say that you have an injury to your brain. Well, I had one myself when I had some operations and took some anesthesia, and then after that I thought I was getting Alzheimer's. It was so scary that I didn't even want to tell a doctor or any friend about it, because I thought, oh, they'll just confirm to me that I'm getting Alzheimer's and my memory is very poor. Anyway, quite gradually it came back, but it was many, many months, like 6 months, before I had good recall again. So I can't tell you the exact source of the injury to my brain, but I do believe it probably was the anesthesia.
So one of the things that happens when we have surgery is that our systems have the trauma. And the trauma from the surgery can be enough to do that to your brain. And then you add the anesthesia, and then you have these compounding things that are happening. So what I think is helpful, I'm glad that you're better. And I'm really glad to see that you're better. Yeah. And I had a concussion in 2014. And it took me a year for my brain to be working normal most of the time. And, I've had lots of health stuff over the years, lots. My medical thing is long, but there's a category of medical things, and then there's a category of brain things. And the brain things is like a completely different thing, because your ability to process information and make sense out of things and remember and communicate, all of that gets impacted. And so it is much more challenging, both for the person as well as for the family members, to figure out what is helpful and what kind of support is needed, and how do you communicate, how do you track, And yet what I've noticed is that the meditation practice is helpful, because even though I could be going through something that was related to the symptoms of the concussion, there's still the ability to know, oh, I feel overwhelmed, or I feel dizzy, or I feel exhausted, or I feel lightheaded, or I feel, my eyes visually are doing strange things. There was still some capacity to notice. And and so then I would have the ability to just ride storms out, put myself in a place that felt safe and just hang in there until this storm would blow through. And it felt like I was hanging in there. It didn't feel tremendously calm or peaceful, but at least I wasn't having a complete meltdown, you know? I was hanging in there, and it would pass, and it was like, you know, what on earth was that all about? I never did have any conceptual framework that could make sense out of these. It was like an electrical storm would go through or something, you know? I don't know what it was, but it would go through, and I would be almost completely dysregulated, and then I would hang in there, and it would pass, and then I could pick up the pieces and figure out what was the next thing to do. But brain stuff is a category of its own. Yeah, it's really challenging. Yes, please.
I'm wondering what you recommend for anxiety around our weather issues and our future. I find going into fire season is making me so anxious, just like, you know, I'm just revisiting last year and the year before, and you know, my daughter lives up in that country, and it just brings it all right back. And I meditate every day, and at night I don't sleep. That's my issue.
So know that you're not the only one that's not sleeping. There's lots of us that are not sleeping, okay? So you're not alone in this.
Right.
But I think the cause of the fires is not going to resolve from our meditation.
Right.
And so I think what might help is to figure out if there's a piece of how this is all linked together, you know, the climate chaos and the fire season increasing 150 more days a year, and the anxiety that it's all causing, to see if there's a natural place where you feel gravitated to engage. Because one of the best things to dispel anxiety is action. And so, on one hand, as meditators, we are told that meditation is the thing that's going to be able to sort it all out. Meditation is invaluable for giving us an anchor to something which is timeless and rooted and ever present. But we need to do more than meditate in order for us to collectively and globally shift the trajectory that we're in into something else. And so even small things, writing postcards, sharing information, going to 350.org meetings, I don't know what would be your interest, but something that you could do that would engage yourself in activity that begins to support redirecting the causes that are making these fire seasons as hard as they are.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, no, I find that if I'm really troubled by something, if I keep it in my head and keep it to myself, it tends to build to insurmountable parts. Yet if I find somebody, and I have several people that I can talk to share it with, it tends to become normal again and get more realistic. I use 2 slogans from a program. One is easy does it, and the other is let go, let God. And I repeat that, and that has a calming effect on me and has gotten me through many awkward situations and not making an idiot out of myself, which I can do very easily.
So I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with all of us, because I think, as you say, that, you know, one of the ways of dispelling anxiety is to speak with another person. And certainly these things tend to, anxiety can perpetuate more anxiety. And then we can see everything that supports us feeling anxious, which then causes a negative spiral. And when we speak to somebody, especially if the person we're talking to is not feeling the anxiety that we are, they can calm ourselves down. So one of my colleagues who taught me trauma release exercises was saying that when he would travel, he would feel anxious. It was just something that he would always feel. So he would make a point of going into a store in the airport and talking to the clerk. It didn't matter what he was talking about. It didn't matter. It made no difference that he didn't even know the person, never met them before. Just eye-to-eye contact and verbal engagement, your limbic system starts to regulate. A completely unknown person about a topic that makes no difference, just speaking with somebody helps. So we can know that and make use of that. And dog parks are great because people are walking their dogs and they're not in a rush. They don't have to get somewhere because their job is to take the dog for a walk. So go to the dog park with some treats in your hands, in your pockets, and talk to the people, the furry people and the people, and dog parks are really lovely. They're like these little oases in our mad, mad world where everyone's rushing from here to there, 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 to there. Also playgrounds where they're little people, you know, and they squeal and they giggle and they laugh.
Is what you just described about your friend and going to into stores and talking to people, is that actually a trauma release thing? Like that's a thing?
Mirror neurons is a thing whether you've got trauma or you don't have trauma. But when you have trauma, then you can recognize that actually is a thing that helps you regulate.
Because I find it helpful.
It is helpful. So
for
it's
years,
right?
you know.
That's right. But you don't have to have trauma for it to be helpful. It's helpful across the board.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah. So part of and then depending on your sensitivity, like when you get super sensitive, you need to be more selective about who you hang out with.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the more grounded, the wiser, the more impactful.
Mm-hmm.
So, like setting it up to have gatherings of people who are interested in meditation, to go to places where there are people who are practicing, where there are people who are cultivating the precepts. These are all things that are designed with careful intention to set it up so that it can maximize the goodness and the positive impact. So my friend Deborah Eden Toll and I are doing this 5-day residential retreat at the 1440 Multiversity, and the topic is Rewiring for Joy. And it will be a combination of working with the regular classical meditation instructions and teaching how to work with things when our limbic system is injured. And I will do laughing yoga in the afternoon, because laughing is a fabulous practice for clearing your system and letting go and letting you acquaint yourself, remember what it feels like to feel joy. So I've left some flyers there if you want. You're welcome to take them. And Deborah Eden Toll and I, we taught this retreat in May, and she's awesome. I love her, and we're a really lovely, compatible, and complementary team. So it's a very, it was wonderful. And everybody who came on the retreat, every single person who came on the retreat, said they had absolutely no idea the transformative effect of what it was going to be like. So they found it really powerful. So what else is alive for you in your practice these days? What's happening? Yes.
I wouldn't say it's alive. It's trying to emerge, which is compassion, because I struggle a lot, as many people here know, with my mother, and I really don't enjoy her, and I'm really trying to understand why I struggle so deeply with her. But when I'm most angry at her, I really try to I really realize that it's a need for compassion more than, like, when I sort of sit down and peel away the layers, I really realize that it's compassion she needs more than anything else.
Okay, so you've told me a little bit of information, but I don't have quite enough.
Yeah.
What is it that makes you so angry? Do you know?
I think her behavior is very, she's needy and anxious, highly anxious, and that behavior it sort of comes out in very, I was going to say, unattractive ways. Like, we'll go to dinner and she'll need a drink, and before she's almost even sitting, her hand goes up and she's trying to get the attention of a waiter, and I find it rude, and she can't be in a room without trying to get, like, just seeking attention, but it's out of anxiety.
So, I'm going to ask you a question. You're
Yeah.
welcome not to answer
Yeah.
it. Is this new behavior for her?
I'd say it's not all new, but I'd say it's definitely in relationship to my father dying 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
So she's alone, and I think she's lonely.
Yeah. So relationship with our parents is complex.
Oh, yes.
And relationships with a mom is very complex for many of us, or for some of us. Yeah. And so the classical Buddhist teaching would say, yeah, compassion, you need compassion for your mom. But I am not a classical Buddhist, and so that's not my first go-to. My first go-to is to bring compassion for yourself. And I would encourage you to make a space where it is completely okay for you to be absolutely pissed off at your mom.
Well, I'm there. I'm definitely there, and but I'm also trying to work on, like, because it causes me so much anxiety that she's lonely, upset, and sad. I'm trying to let go of all that from my standpoint. Like, I am not responsible for her. I can't take care of her, even though I know my father would want me to make sure she's okay. I have to let go of all that, because, like Gail, I lose a lot of sleep over worrying that she's okay. So I am with you on trying to be compassionate for myself in the letting go of trying to take care of her or be annoyed by her or wanting to be compassionate for her, because it's stressful. It's very hard to be a good daughter, or in the way I think my father would have wanted me to care for her, or whatever is expected of a good daughter in society, when you don't like that person. There's a lot there.
There is a lot there. And all of it is, I wonder if it's possible to make a space where it's all welcome, So in these relationships that are complex, there's layers and layers and layers of stuff that's going on. And I know that when a person has their own basic needs getting met, they have a very different level of resource than when they don't. I know that, yeah. So when you're trying to be a good daughter, that's a different thing from, it's like with me with the ants, when I got it, that there's this different quality of what it feels like to live with respect just because that it feeds me, then I stop needing the people around me to be deserving of it. It's like a radical reframe from my own inner perspective. But I didn't get there because I wanted to be a good person. I got there because I saw the impact of what happens when you just live like that.
I would have to become a monastic and then leave after 26 years. And
No, you start with where you're at and you touch it and just exactly, which is what you're doing, exactly what you're doing. But I wouldn't, it's like there's something can happen when you stay with the challenge without feeling like you've got to give up the anger, give up the not liking your mom in order to bring compassion. You know, so you've got two separate needs: the need for compassion for yourself, and then what's presenting for your mom.
Mhm.
So I would invite you to stay with the struggle. Be as honest with this whole process as you can. And don't give up on yourself.
appreciate that.
And see what happens. Now, I wouldn't encourage you to abandon your mom.
I won't.
But there might be something that emerges through this where you're neither abandoning yourself nor her. And I imagine that if that emerges for you, it will have less struggle. You'll have more clarity.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, if there aren't other questions, let's close with a loving kindness meditation and sharing of blessings. And so just allowing yourself to bring your attention inward. Focus on your body. Take a couple of breaths in and out. And bring to mind the image of something or someone that evokes in you this feeling of real deep loving kindness. It might be a family member or a dear friend. It might be a wise and trusted elder or mentor. It might be somebody like Mother Teresa or Ramana Maharshi or Ajahn Chah or Mahagosananda. It might be a pet or a place in nature when you go there, you just feel deeply supported and cared for and held. So it really doesn't matter whether it's a human, whether they're known, whether it's an animal or whether it's a place. What is important is that when you bring this to mind, what you feel is a loving kindness. Warmth, closeness, care, safety. And so I invite you to allow the image to become clear. And if if it's a living being, imagine this being in front of you, absolutely delighted to see you. Completely delighted to see you. And you can see that they are so happy to see you doing as well as you are. And you sense that all that they want for you is for you to flourish. And they've got no agenda whatsoever. And so imagine the kindness of these twinkling eyes looking at you, the delight to see you, the joy to see you well. And just let in their kindness. Let it in. Let it touch you. Let it impact you. Let it fill you. And if it's a place, just allow yourself to be held and know the quality of holding and care and support you feel by this place. And let it in. Let in that care. Let in that holding. Let in that support. Let it into your body, into your heart, into your bones. So you breathe it in. And let it fill you up and spread throughout your body and your heart and your mind. So whether it's a person, a place, an animal, it makes no difference. We let it in and then we let it spread through our body, our heart, and our mind until we feel filled up with loving kindness. And now when we feel filled up, then we are in a position to share it with others. Before we feel filled up, then it's actually really helpful just to stay with our own process. And so we can shift gears from loving kindness, bring our attention to our efforts to be here tonight, what it took to come, the efforts of the organizers to set this up, of everybody showing up, the conversation, the guided meditation, the discussion. And just knowing that there are treasures in all of this. Little golden keys opening our hearts and our minds to freedom. And we can let these golden keys turn into a dust of blessings, a blessing dust. So the goodness that we received, we can share it and let it sprinkle into the air and touch everyone here and travel to touch all of those people who are in this community who are not present tonight. The regular teachers, the visiting teachers, the teachers who've passed. And let this blessing dust spread out into the neighborhood and into the earth and into the air and into the water. And spread out into larger areas and sprinkle on everyone who's feeling stress and tension who are having to evacuate, the people who are on the front lines of the fires, and to the activists who are trying to spearhead change, and to all people in all directions. We can allow the blessings of our evening to positively impact them and bring them safety and protection and joy, ease and loving kindness. So I want to close with my appreciation for your presence, for your commitment to practice, for your deep questions, and for sharing a lovely evening together. Thank you. So I also want to mention that there's a sign-up sheet if you would like to be on the Awakening Truth e-list newsletter. It doesn't come out every month, but it comes out sometimes. And there's a sign-up sheet up here next to the flyers. And
What is that group?
the Awakening Truth organization is the organization that has been supporting me in my teachings in my community for the last 10 years, and is often the one that is organizing retreats. And
Okay. Is it through 1440?
no,
No.
Awakening Truth is a separate 501c3. 1440 is the venue that we will be doing a retreat in
Oh, I
April and May.
Yeah. Gotcha.
You're working? Yeah.
See.